to read or not to read? I think that's a bigger question.
Hello everyone, this is Angel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be recommending another great novel that I personally have read 3 times. And that should actually tell you how much I love the book. To be honest, I just went to the local bookstore and grabbed the book without checking the price. That's the most important information. I didn't even care if there weren't any discounts. This book cost 630 NT dollars. That's quite a price for a paperback, right? Well, I don't care about the price. I just want the book. I actually want the old version of the book. I don't really like the cover of the new edition. The old cover is the best illustration of the story. It's epic. And so, if a book costs $630 for a paperback, I'm all for it. Which book made me go bananas? Well, here's the first hint, the hook of our story. The girl wakes up in someone else's bed. She lies there, perfectly still, tries to hold time like a breath in her chest, as if she can keep the clock from ticking forward, keep the boy beside her from waking, keep the memory of their night alive through sheer force of will. If you just read this part, you probably think this is the beginning of a story talking about a crazy stalker or a crazy ex that just couldn't let go of the boy, right? Yes, it does sound like that, but wait till you read the next sentence. She knows, of course, that she can. Knows that he'll forget. He will forget? Does it ring a bell? It sounds like the movie 50 First Day, where the girl had a memory loss. She couldn't remember anything the next day when she woke up. Hence, she couldn't remember her boyfriend, which is really traumatizing for the boy. Except, it seems in this book, it's the boy who has a memory loss because she said, knows that he will forget. But hold on, let's continue with the next line. They always do. Who are they? When it's just one person forgetting, then you think it is his problem. But when it's they, that's more than one person, then we would think it's her problem. So what exactly is going on here? Why would they be forgetting? And forgetting what? So let's move on to our second clue. Part of our first chapter. It isn't his fault. It is never their faults. The boy is still asleep, and she watches the slow rise and fall of his shoulders, the place where his dark hair curls against the nape of his neck, the scar along his ribs, details long memorized. His name is Toby. Last night she told him hers was Jess. She lied, but only because she can't say her real name. One of the vicious little details tucked like nettles in the grass, hidden barbs designed to sting. What is a person if not the marks they leave behind? She has learned to step between the thorny weeds, but there are some cuts that cannot be avoided. A memory, a photograph, a name. In the last months, she has been Claire, Zoe, Michelle, but 2 nights ago when she was ill and they were closing down a late-night cafe after one of his gigs, Toby said he was in love with a girl named Jess. He simply hadn't met her yet. So now she's Jess. Toby begins to stir, and she feels the old familiar ache in her chest as he stretches, rolls towards her, but doesn't wake. Not yet. His face is now inches from her, his lips parted in sleep, black curls shadowing his eyes, dark lashes against fair cheeks. Once the darkness teased the girl as they strolled along the Seine, told her that she had a type, insinuating that most of the men she chose, and even a few of the women, looked an awful lot like him. The same dark hair, the same sharp eyes, the same etched features. But that wasn't fair. After all, the darkness only looked the way he did because of her. She'd given him that shape, chosen what to make of him, what to see. That was only just the first page of the book, and already it's filled with a lot of information. First of all, the girl has many different names, and she actually told the same guy that many different names. And somehow, this guy didn't remember her. And we also know from a fact, there's one truth about her, and that is, she couldn't tell people her real name. Did that make you go, huh? Why not? So what was the secret that she's hiding? Also, almost to the end of the page, you found that there's another character where she called this thing the darkness. And obviously that's a man, because he was teasing her for choosing guys that looked like him. But in her defense, what this darkness looked like was what she made of him, or what she want him to look like. Does that make any sense? And does it actually make you wonder what is really going on here? By the way, on the very top of the page, there was actually a date. It says New York City, March 10th, 2014. That information is very important because this story is going back and forth between different timelines and different cities. The dates are very important to make the story flow. Are you guys curious to see what the cover of the book looked like? That I insisted on paying $630 for that particular cover. Well, here comes our third clue. If you have already read the book, would you be able to shout out the name of the book? If you haven't read the book, you can try to guess why I love the cover of this book. I'm going to show you the cover of the new edition as well on the side so that you can actually compare. And eventually, I'm going to tell you the whole story, and so that you get to understand why I still want the last edition, not the latest edition. So you ready to see the cover? 3, 2, 1. Ta-da! The book is called The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I read it 3 times. That tells you, really. That's how much I love it. And here is the latest edition. So you can see the difference between the two. They're completely the opposite. Cover, black, really best describe the story. You understand why we need a black cover for the story. And then there's this, 7 dots that seems like a constellation. That's also another important feature of the story. That's why I would prefer to have the edition rather than this one, because I don't see any connection to how that cover is to do with the story. Alright, what is The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue about? Well, let me start with a quote in the very beginning of the story that was actually said by one character in the story. This is what she said. "The old gods may be great, but they are neither kind nor merciful. They are fickle, unsteady, as moonlight on water, or shadows in a storm. If you insist on calling them, take heed. Be careful what you ask for. Be willing to pay the price. And no matter how desperate or dire, never pray to the gods that answer after dark." That is the most important information to the story. This was how the whole story started. The story actually began with the date 2014, March 10th, but it was in France back on July 29th, 1714. It's the date that changed her life completely. Have you noticed something strange? Yes, it started back in 1714 in France, which means she had been alive for 300 years. So what happened back in 1714? Eddie was a girl that was not the typical ordinary girls of her time. So when she reached the age where she should be getting married, she refused to do so. So when her mom forced her to marry this widower with kids, she accidentally made a deal with the god that answered after dark. Let me tell you her prayers, and then you could understand why you should never pray to the god that answers after dark, because you don't want the same thing to happen to you, do you? So this was her prayer. "I do not want to belong to someone else. I do not want to belong to anyone but myself. I want to be free to live and to find my own way, to love or to be alone, but at least it is my choice. And I'm not afraid of not having choices. So scared of the years rushing past beneath my feet. I do not want to die as I have lived, which is no life at all." She basically asked for herself to be free of choices, to be free, and she would not belong to anyone but herself. But this God actually took her prayer to the next level. The God answered her prayer. In return, he could take her life when she's done with it. You would think, yay, she's free, right? No. His definition of being free and not belonging to anyone means no one will remember her once their eyes are off her. Do you understand what I'm talking about? For example, if you were her and you tried to introduce yourself to me, and I'd be like, "Oh, hi, Cloudy, right? Nice to meet you." But then when I looked away for a few seconds and I looked back at you, I'd be like, "Oh, hi." do I know you? What's your name? Like, I would not remember you. That's his perspective of being free and not belonging to anyone. And what's worse, she could not say or write or shout out her name to anyone. If she tried to write her name down, by the time she moved on to the next letter, first letter will slowly fade away. She was already having a tough time, not having people remembering her, not being able to tell people her name, and to make it worse, she couldn't have any possessions. Like, she could actually have her clothes, okay, the clothes that she's wearing, that's on her, but then she couldn't actually have a lot of possessions on her. Hence, she couldn't buy a house. There's no home for her to go back to. And so she would have to be wandering around the street for 300 years. So which means she found a way to adapt herself to this life. Just as she thought that's going to be the rest of her life, where people would not remember her. 300 years later, she found a man that remembered her. How she found out that he remembered her was also a very interesting interaction. Of course, you will eventually find out why the guy actually remembered her. Another interesting part of her life was, even though the people she encountered would never remember her, but because she had 7 freckles on her face, a lot of the people that didn't remember her somehow remembered that there was this girl that had freckles on her face that looked like the constellation. And so they would vaguely remember a girl with the constellation on her face. And this is why I love the cover of this book. First of all, the black background was to make the deal with the god that entered after dark. The next thing was the constellation, the only thing people vaguely remembered. That's why I think this cover best illustrates the story more than the latest edition. The book by V.E. Schwab is actually for 17 years and older, and it doesn't have a Lexile level. The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue is the editor's pick, and it also belongs to historical fantasy as well as epic fantasy. Just like what the book said, this is a life that no one will remember, but it will be a story that you will never forget. That's a very strong quote. I really love V. Schwab's writing. So if you're intrigued to find out what happens next, you should go to the nearest bookstore and grab it. Enjoy reading, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!